Now that you have a pretty good basic understanding of the 6 trig functions and kind of what trig looks like, we're going to kind of go into with this video, given one angle on one side, able to solve triangles. And you'll see why as we go a little bit deeper into this, but this is kind of what land surveyors do when they have to find heights of buildings or heights of trees or things that you can't find distant measurements of by hand or with any tools. So trig is actually used a lot in that situation. So hopefully you'll be able to find that out and see how it works in this section. All right, so first we need to learn how to solve a triangle before we can get to those kind of things. So what we're going to do here is, like I told you, we're given one angle and we're given one side. So what we have to do is just, let's say we wanted to solve for x first. Okay, so I'll do x in purple and then y in a different thing. This is actually 2 different questions. It's solving for x, so you won't have to always do both, and then it's also solving for y. So we'll do them 2 separate ways. But what you have to do is take from the angle that you have to decide on the trig function. And generally we use sine, cosine, and tangent. So from this 25 degrees, I want to decide what x and 1, what ratio that is in a trig function. So x is actually going to be the adjacent. So in my head, I'm thinking, okay, x is the adjacent and 1 is the hypotenuse. And then you have to determine which trig function gives you adjacent over hypotenuse. And so once you decide that that's cosine, you're going to set up the equation as cosine of the angle 25 degrees is equal to, and then one of these should be a variable, which makes sense because adjacent is going to be the variable, and then the hypotenuse is going to be 1. And so what I would do in this case is just simply solve for x. That means I multiply by 1 to both sides. And so in my calculator, I'm going to have to figure out what cosine of 25 is, and then multiply that by 1, and that gives me what x is. So I have a calculator here. I couldn't get it to show up on the screen, but basically in the classroom calculators, you're going to type in 25 and then cosine, and that gives you 0.906. We'll just do 2 decimal places for now, so it would be 0.91, and then when I multiply that by 1, I just get 0.91 again. So that's kind of how we're going to be using word problems and things like that, where we're given one angle on one side. All right, so for the next one, for y, we're going to have to figure out which ratio we have. So we have the opposite and the hypotenuse. Opposite over hypotenuse is sine. So we're going to set this up as sine 25 degrees equals the opposite, which is y, over the hypotenuse, which is 1. And then same thing, I'm going to multiply by 1 to both sides. And I'm going to figure out what the sine of 25 degrees is. And I'm going to use these little symbols actually instead, because that means approximate. Since we're rounding off the decimal, we're going to have to use approximation symbols instead. So this ends up being 0.42, and 0.42 times 1 is just 0.42. This is an example of the questions you're going to be working in class tomorrow. So what I'd like for you to do is try it first and do the pause and play again. So you try your answer, see how far you can get, and then stop and come back and check. All right, so in this case, you're looking at, from the angle, we have adjacent. This is adjacent, and this is hypotenuse. So adjacent over hypotenuse is actually cosine. So our problem is going to be cosine of 30 degrees equals x over 8. And then to solve that, we're going to multiply by 8 to both sides. Now when we type this in the calculator though, what we have to do is start with cosine of 30. So in the calculators you have in my classroom, it will be 30 cosine, and then do times 8. And that gives me 6.93 if it's rounded. So you may just want to try it out with whatever calculator you have and make sure you're getting the same thing. Okay, Okay, so the next question, again, you can pause and play again, maybe try this one. Hopefully you can get this one a little better by yourself if you didn't get the first one. But again, this one actually is similar. It's still going to be adjacent over hypotenuse. So adjacent over hypotenuse is cosine. So again, we're going to set up cosine of 30 degrees equals x over 12. So we multiply by 12 to both sides. And then we're going to do 30 cosine. Doesn't matter what that is because we're just going to multiply it by 12. And so then in that case, x is 10.39. And so what we found is what this side has to be and what this side has to be. All right, so we're going to build on that a little bit more over the next couple of days. This is really just the basics. So good luck, and I will see you tomorrow.